What are the most crucial offseason needs for this Denver Broncos team as they turn the page to 2026? And with Aaron Gordon expected to miss another chunk of significant time, should the priority for the remainder of the regular season change for the Denver Nuggets as they continue their hopeful push toward another NBA Finals appearance? All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel. You can find us at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also watch us on X or on Facebook, regardless of where you watch us. Like, comment, share, subscribe, get involved in the conversation as we love to engage with you throughout the course of the program, and turn on those post notifications so that you never miss a moment with us here at Denver Sports 1043 The Fan. Tons to get into today as it relates to a couple of our hometown teams. First and foremost, the Denver Broncos, who are now, again, as we are on the doorstep of Super Bowl week, and every NFL organization, save for two, is turning their page to the 2026 NFL season. It's already time to start asking the questions about what groceries are going to need to be bought for George Paton and Sean Payton to start cooking things up for next season. They certainly had an active and busy offseason this past offseason in free agency, bringing in the likes of Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, J.K. Dobbins, drafting the likes of Jahdae Barron, R.J. Harvey. A lot of key contributors being brought in this past offseason, but some of them didn't really pan out, I think, the way that we thought they might. On the free agency side of things, I think Evan Ingram falls pretty squarely in that category. He was brought in to be a receiving threat, tight end, and weapon for Bo Nix and Sean Payton to kind of further entrench into the system that Sean's brought here to Denver. And it really just felt like we were left wanting week after week after week. We got flashes, we got a nibble here or a taste there, but it really didn't feel satisfying when you're looking at an 18-game sample size for the Denver Broncos as to what they got for the tight end that they paid tens of millions of dollars on a multi-year contract this past offseason. How about R.J. Harvey, right? You're talking about a second-round running back, top 60 pick in the NFL draft. J.K. Dobbins' season ended in very familiar fashion from what we are used to seeing from him. He goes down about 10 weeks into the season because of a hip drop tackle against the Las Vegas Raiders. And R.J. Harvey's kind of thrust into that spotlight to be this starting down-to-down between the tackles running back and replicate what J.K. was able to do when he had the Broncos as a top 10 fringe top 5 rushing offense through the first half or so of the season. And it just didn't quite feel like we were right there. Don't sleep on the wide receiver position, because in all honesty, we got a season from Courtland Sutton that at times looked like what we thought it would, but at other times, especially when you factor in drop rate and other areas of effectiveness, just felt a little bit flat. Troy Franklin was poised for this breakout next step type of season and certainly sputtered down the backstretch. Pat Bryant was more of the opposite. It was more of a slow burn with him, where he picked up trust and effectiveness over the course of the season, really solidifying himself in Sean Payton's eyes as one of the better blocking receivers on the team. And certainly in the postseason, before he ended up having to leave due to injury and concussion, was proving himself to be pretty sure-handed. On the defensive side of the ball, Dre Greenlaw, right? Inside linebacker that was supposed to be this Ray Lewis-esque sideline-to-sideline ball-hawking thumper that was going to bring that physicality back to the interior of the middle, I should say, of the Broncos defense, and maybe potentially prevent them from being such a liability in coverage against tight ends as that position continues to grow more athletic and dangerous in the passing game around the league. He started the offseason hurt. He started the season hurt. He came back and got suspended. He got banged up again and was able to come in, and be somewhat effective in moments down the backstretch of the season. But that kind of felt like something we were left wanting a little bit as well. So I think the question that's being asked is, given how we saw the 2025 season play out for the Denver Broncos, what new areas of need came up? What areas of need that we thought were addressed maybe should be readdressed or certainly weren't solved to the degree that we would hope? I ask you because from my perspective, it feels pretty clear. This offseason, whether you want to do it solely in free agency, you want to do it solely in the draft, or a mixture of both, which is probably the most popular or common approach, this offseason for the Denver Broncos has to be the offseason of offense. Sean Payton's offense and his system, with Bo Nix at the center of it, the quarterback that he handpicked, has the potential to score and keep pace with some of the better teams in the NFL. You can say, well, how can you say that? There was a whole regular season of ugly performances and bad stretches and tough quarters of football. True. But there was also some unbelievable crunch time, clutch performances in the fourth quarters, in overtimes, culminating with the last healthy game for Bo Nix, a 33-30 overtime shootout win over Josh Allen, the NFL's legitimate gunslinger, and the Buffalo Bills. And they did all of that without any kind of real consistent threat or production in the run game post J.K. Dobbins, without the joker that we thought was promised with Evan Ingram, or really a receiving threat of any kind on a week-to-week basis from the tight end room, without a clear-cut wide receiver 2, or if a significant drop-off at a minimum between the wide receiver 1 for the Broncos and then the rest of the field. All of that still didn't stop the Broncos from reaching the AFC Championship game, and probably, in my opinion, wouldn't have stopped them from reaching the Super Bowl had Bo Nix's ankle not been fractured. This offseason has to be the one where Sean Payton and George Payton fix those ailments. Some of the same ailments they tried to fix this past offseason, going to have to go back to the well. I don't know that RJ Harvey is a legitimate RB1 right now in the National Football League. Not for a team that is retooling rather than rebuilding. Not for a team that was on the doorstep of a Super Bowl compared to a team that was drafting in the top 10 or top half of the draft in the previous year. The Broncos are not the latter, and so they need more of a sure thing in the running back room and probably need to address it more than once. Whether that's bringing in a free agent via trade or signing the likes of Breece Hall, who is a under the age of 25 running back stuck on a bad New York Jets team. Kyron Williams, a running back in his mid to late 20s for the Los Angeles Rams. It's very productive. Kenneth Walker, an absolute stud who's going to be playing in Super Bowl 60 for the Seattle Seahawks. And outside of some health issues from time to time in his young NFL career, has been a very productive back. RJ Harvey can be, to me, a nice Robin, an RB2, even a 1B. But he can't be the one. There's a letter after that or some sort of qualifier associated with it. That's why it worked, in my opinion, pretty well with J.K. Dobbins as the Batman or the 1A in that scenario. And Evan Ingram, you're on the hook for another $10+ million, $14 million cap hit, $10 million dead cap if they were to try to move on from him. I'm not saying they should move on from him, but they've either got to figure out a way to get him more involved and more productive, which he was clearly vocal about all season, or they've got to find somebody else to replicate and replace that production. There's going to be needs on the defensive side of the ball as well. You're going to have to make some decisions at inside linebacker with Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad, both up for the bill this offseason. You've got questions potentially in the safety room from a depth perspective, and there's going to be pieces to add in free agency in the draft on Vance Joseph's side of the ball as well. But the Broncos are going to need more consistent production and firepower on offense in a reliable fashion in 2026 than they had in 2025 if they want to hope to get to the same stage that they just fell short on in the AFC Championship game. Because the amount of green lights, the amount of miraculous, heroic comebacks, and the fourth quarter clutch performances that we saw from this offense, while it shouldn't go away entirely, you can't, if you are the Broncos, rely on that or count on that to happen and unfold the same way. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs from 2024 compared to 2025. It was a mirror image, a complete reversal of all the luck that they had in 2024 came up dry for them in 2025, and their team flipped on its head because of it. The Broncos need to avoid falling into that trap and make this offseason the offseason of offense, for lack of a better term. It is time to hit the turn, presented by The Birdie Bar, Louisville's premier outdoor golf bar and entertainment venue. With their miniature golf setup and heated patio, they have the perfect cure for your winter blues. I want to shift gears a little bit here toward the Denver Nuggets, who, man, changed the record. Stop me if you've heard it before, but the Denver Nuggets got more bad news on the injury front with one of their core members. Aaron Gordon, Mr. Nugget, my favorite Nugget maybe of all time, with some recency bias in there, acknowledging that Jokic is the undisputed GOAT, and there's no challenge to that. But I have been very vocal about how much I love, respect, and appreciate what Aaron Gordon has brought to this Nuggets organization, and coming over here in what I deem to be the greatest Nuggets trade of all time. That Aaron Gordon is going to miss another 4 to 6 weeks after re-aggravating his hamstring injury that already kept him out the entire month of December. He suffered it in mid-November, didn't return until 4 days into the new year, and now will be out again with a reevaluation period of 4 to 6 weeks. That is stacking on top of the evaluation period for Nikola Jokic, which was extended and therefore made him ineligible for MVP and other regular season awards. That is on top of the injuries to Cam Johnson and Jonas Valanciunas and Christian Brown, who, even though he has come back and played games, has looked staggered at times and clearly doesn't seem to be playing at 100% of himself. Jamal Murray and Peyton Watson fighting through ailments of their own, in their own right. And the depth of this Nuggets team being tested in a way that we certainly didn't hope and definitely didn't expect going into this 2025 season with the optimism that we had. And this Nuggets team that's only been healthy for 15 games in the NBA season so far, going 12-3 during that span, clearly has shown to me that they can beat anybody. Western Conference, Eastern Conference, doesn't matter. That Nuggets squad can beat anybody in a 7-game series if they're fully healthy and firing on all cylinders. But that's only happened 15 times in this season. And it's starting to, as the calendar is getting ready to turn to February, and we have the All-Star break coming up before a ramp-up period to the NBA postseason, which begins in mid-April. There's starting to become a question of how is the timeline of these injuries and their returns all going to work out? When you're balancing and juggling this many different ailments, from the knees to the ankles, to leg ailments like Jonas Valanciunas, when you're juggling all of that, how do you manage the timetables for reevaluation, the rehabilitation, and then the ramp-up periods to make sure that they are all able to come back appropriately, but promptly, and regain the chemistry as a collective unit that they're going to need when the postseason comes, the rotation tightens, and suddenly every game is for real? It's begging a legitimate question as to whether or not the Nuggets should change their strategy down the backstretch of this season. The Denver Nuggets are currently tied in the loss column for second in the Western Conference behind the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's a pretty advantageous spot for them to be in from a potential seeding perspective. And it's impressive given the amount of injuries that they've juggled from basically the beginning of this season to now. However, there's been years in the past, very recent past, where chasing the number one seed felt like a very reasonable option for the Nuggets and something that they should push for because of the advantage that it would give them, in a postseason bracket. And we saw how having to be on the wrong side of the bracket and face Oklahoma City in the second round because they lost a regular season game against a bad San Antonio Spurs team that ended up being a tiebreaker. That, to me, is evidence as to why you would want to push that. But I'm not sure that's where the Nuggets are mentally or where they should be right now. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This Nuggets team, at full health, with the depth that Ben Tenzer and Jonathan Wallace as co-executive vice presidents in their first rodeo here in the Mile High City in charge, is capable of going toe-to-toe with and beating any team in the NBA when they are at full strength. The problem is I'm starting to question whether or not they can be at full strength and with all of the different ramp-up periods available to them, have their postseason chemistry and routine dialed in when it's starting to matter the most, which is why I think I am warming up to the idea that the Nuggets should be as cautious as possible with the returns of their star players, from Aaron Gordon to Cam Johnson to Jokic to Jonas Valanciunas, being gentle with Christian Brown, who is clearly dealing with ailments and lingering injury effects from his injuries earlier in the season. Prioritize the health and make sure that when April 18th rolls around, this squad, depth and starters alike, is able to endure the 16 to 20-something game run that they are going to need to take in the NBA playoffs in order to reach a finals and potentially bring home another Larry O'Brien trophy. Seeding is always going to be something that we look at and wonder where it could have been more advantageous, or if they had played here versus there, how would it have shaken out differently. I don't know if the Nuggets have the luxury of trying to really hammer down from a seeding perspective what's most advantageous. They may be at a point, because of the injury onslaught that they've faced over the course of this season, where their mindset needs to shift to, we've just got to focus on us, turn things internal, get healthy, get healed, get right, and then when the playoffs roll around, bet on us, bet on ourselves to be able to beat whoever's in front of us, even if an easier path happened to exist. It's going to be a fascinating thing to keep our eyes on. We may, as the week rolls into next week, we'll have plenty of Super Bowl discussions to play on to there. But also, it feels weird to say for a team that's got a pretty healthy lead in the National Hockey League in terms of points, certainly in their division, their conference, but in the league as a whole. It feels maybe a little weird to ask this question, but should some alarm bells be going off about the Colorado Avalanche right now, who've now lost 6 of their last 8 games? They lose in convincing fashion to the Montreal Canadiens, 7-3. And it feels like during this 8-game stretch where they've dropped 6, so stylistically, there's some questions that need to be asked about whether or not the Avs need to maybe shake up the snow globe a little bit or reimagine the way that they've approached the season up to this point, because they might be slowly but surely starting to be figured out by the rest of the league and how to best neutralize, slow down, and or stop the high-powered, high-octane firepower that the Avalanche forward group brings on a night-to-night basis. Those are conversations we will have going into next week. But until then, enjoy your weekend. Like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan YouTube channel, and we will catch you Monday at noon for the next rundown.